Nike is everywhere. On the streets of New York, in gyms in Tokyo, on football fields in Europe, and on basketball courts in small towns across the world. It is one of those rare brands that doesn't feel like a company anymore. It feels like a symbol of movement, of ambition, of pushing past limits. But what most people don't realize is that Nike was never supposed to become this powerful. It started as a risky idea that almost failed before it even began. To men, no big investors, no safety net, and a belief that sports could be done better than anyone thought possible. That belief would eventually turn into a multi-billion-dollar empire. But the path to get there was anything but smooth. In the early 1960s, Phil Knight was just a college athlete at the University of Oregon. He wasn't the star of the team. He wasn't expected to go professional. But he had something unusual for someone his age. He was thinking about business while everyone else was thinking about competition. His coach, Bill Bowerman, was the opposite of most coaches at the time. He wasn't satisfied with standard equipment. He constantly questioned everything. Why are shoes so heavy? Why do athletes have to suffer unnecessary weight? Why hasn't anyone improved this yet? He began experimenting on his own athletes, cutting shoes apart, changing soles, testing different materials. Sometimes his experiments worked. Sometimes they failed completely. But what mattered was the mindset. He believed performance was not fixed. It could always be improved. And after graduating, Phil Knight took a trip that would change his entire life. He traveled to Japan. At the time, Japan was becoming a global manufacturing powerhouse. What he discovered there surprised him. Japanese companies were producing running shoes that were not only high quality, but also significantly cheaper than Western brands. That insight created a massive opportunity. If he could bring these shoes to America, he could compete with giants like Adidas. So he made a deal with a Japanese manufacturer. When he returned to the United States, he partnered with Bill Bowerman. Each of them invested $500, a total of $1,000. That was the beginning. They called it Blue Ribbon Sports. But in reality, it was barely a company. There were no employees, no headquarters, no brand identity, just a few boxes of shoes and a risky idea. Phil Knight personally drove across states selling shoes at track events. He would open the trunk of his car and sell directly to runners after races. Some people ignored him. Some were skeptical, but some tried the shoes. And those athletes started noticing, but success always brings pressure. And in this case, it created a dangerous dependency. Blue Ribbon Sports relied completely on its Japanese supplier. If that supplier changed its strategy, the entire business could collapse overnight. And that is exactly what started to happen. As sales increased, the supplier realized something important. They were not just producing shoes anymore. They were fueling a competitor. Tension began building in the relationship. Orders became uncertain. Communication slowed down. And Phil Knight found himself facing a terrifying reality. If the supply stopped, everything they built would disappear. This moment became a turning point. Instead of waiting for the business to collapse, they made a bold decision. They would stop being distributors and become creators. They would build their own identity, their own brand, their own future. And in 1971, that decision became reality. Nike was born. The name came from the Greek goddess of victory. Short, powerful, easy to remember. Around the same time, a design student created the Swoosh logo. Simple curved shape, minimalist, almost too simple to notice. She was paid only $35 for it. At the time, it was just another freelance project. Nobody could have predicted that this design would become one of the most recognizable symbols. Even with a new brand, Nike still had a problem. They needed something that made them different, something no competitor could copy easily. That something came from Bill Bowerman. He was constantly experimenting, looking for small advantages that could create big performance improvements. One morning, while eating breakfast, he stared at his waffle iron, and something clicked. The grid pattern, perfect spacing, perfect grip structure. He asked himself a question that seemed almost ridiculous. What if a shoe sole had this exact pattern? Instead of ignoring the idea, he tested it. He went to his workshop and began pouring rubber into molds shaped like a waffle iron. It was messy, uncontrolled, experimental. But after multiple attempts, a new sole was born. The waffle sole. It improved traction, reduced weight, and gave runners a noticeable performance boost. Athletes immediately felt the difference. This wasn't just an improvement. It was a breakthrough, and it proved something important. Innovation doesn't always come from laboratories. Sometimes it comes from curiosity in everyday life. By the early 1980s, Nike was growing fast, but they still lacked global cultural dominance. That changed in 1984, when they took one of the biggest risks in sports marketing history. They signed Michael Jordan. At that time, Jordan was not yet a legend. He was a rookie entering the NBA. Talented, but unproven. Nike believed he had something different. Not just skill, but presence. They proposed something radical. Instead of simply sponsoring him, they would build a shoe line entirely around him. A product that carried his identity. Air Jordan. It was a massive gamble. If Jordan failed, the entire investment could collapse. But if he succeeded, it could change everything. And it did. The shoes exploded in popularity. Stores couldn't keep them in stock. People lined up overnight just to buy them. Sneakers stopped being just sports equipment. They became cultural identity, fashion, status, and lifestyle. This was the moment Nike stopped being just a sports brand and became a cultural empire. With success came competition. Adidas, Reebok, and dozens of rising brands. Everyone wanted Nike's position. The market became extremely aggressive. Nike needed more than products. They needed emotion, a message that could connect with anyone, not just athletes, but everyday people. And that is when they created one of the most powerful slogans in history. Just do it. 3 words. But they carried a massive idea. Stop waiting. Stop doubting. Start moving. It wasn't about sports. It was about life. And it worked on a global scale. Nike stopped selling shoes and started selling mindset. But global success always comes with consequences. In the 1990s, Nike faced serious criticism. Reports revealed poor working conditions in overseas factories. The media coverage was intense. Headlines spread worldwide. Public trust was shaken. For a brand built on inspiration, this was a major crisis. Nike responded by changing policies, improving transparency, and introducing new labor standards. It was not an easy process, but it marked a shift in how global companies are held accountable. Profit alone was no longer enough. Responsibility mattered too. Despite controversy, Nike continued expanding, not just in sports, but in culture itself. Basketball, football, running, fashion, music, streetwear. Nike became something people didn't just wear. They identified with it. Musicians used it as style. Athletes used it for performance. Everyday people used it for expression. The swoosh became more than a logo. It became a global identity marker, a signal. Today, Nike is a global empire, but its story is not really about shoes. It is about belief. Belief that small ideas can become global movements. That ordinary people can build extraordinary things. That progress starts with action, one step at a time. And that is why the message still matters today. Just do it.